Peace. If you could bottle the sound of a Tuesday morning in the suburbs, it would be the exact sound that was filling my new home office. It was a delicate cocktail of a distant lawnmower, the gentle hum of my computer, and the near-silent drip of my single-origin coffee brewing in the corner. This was it. The dream. After years of living in apartments where my upstairs neighbor's hobbies apparently included competitive bowling and elephant husbandry, I had finally bought a house. A real house, with a real lawn, and a glorious, impenetrable buffer of silence between me and the rest of the world. My work-from-home life as a graphic designer depended on this tranquility. I'd established what I called the good neighbor doctrine, a simple code of conduct designed for maximum peaceful coexistence. It had 3 core tenets. 1. Smile and wave at everyone. Always. 2. If you see your neighbor's trash can is still out by dusk, roll it back up for them. 3. Mind your own damn business with the focus and intensity of a bomb disposal expert. For 2 blissful months, it worked. The neighborhood was a postcard of suburban harmony. I was coasting on a wave of serene productivity, crafting beautiful logos for artisanal salt companies and feeling like I'd truly cracked the code to adult life. Then the mail arrived. Tucked between a flyer for a pizza place I'd never order from and a credit card offer with an interest rate that could be classified as a war crime, was a single, crisp, cream-colored envelope. It felt different, heavier. The paper stock was thick, expensive, and in the top left corner, embossed in shimmering gold foil, was a logo I'd already come to dread. Westwood Meadows Homeowners Association. I opened it with the same caution one might use to handle an unexploded ordnance. Inside, a single sheet of matching cream paper lay waiting. Official notice of violation. My eyes scanned the text. My heart rate, which had been resting at a placid, napping cat level, kicked up a notch. Dear Mr. Maxwell, this letter serves as a formal notice of a violation of the Westwood Meadows Covenants, Conditions, Restrictions, CC Rupees, Article 4, Section 2, Aesthetic Harmony. It has been observed by the Architectural Control Committee that the garden hose located on the east-facing spigot of your property is of an unapproved color. The observed color, forest green, is not in compliance with the community-wide color palette. Per the attached schedule, approved colors for watering apparatus are earth tone brown, Pantone 7000, 526C, and classic beige, Pantone 468C. You have 14 days from the date of this notice to rectify this violation. Failure to comply will result in a fine of $25. Yours in community, the Westwood Meadows HOA Board. I read it again, then a third time, just to make sure I hadn't suffered a minor stroke. A fine. For a hose. Was this a prank? I half expected the letter to be signed, Yours in conformity, the Committee for the Eradication of Joy. I walked to the window and looked out at my lawn. There, coiled neatly beside the faucet, was the offender. My garden hose. It looked green. A perfectly respectable, functional hose-like green. Was I supposed to have consulted a Pantone color chart before making a purchase at Home Depot? Did they have an HOA liaison in the gardening aisle? As I stood there, dumbfounded, I saw her. A woman in her late 50s, dressed in a crisp pink tracksuit with matching visor, was power-walking down the sidewalk. Her arms pumped with military precision, her chin held high, and tucked under one arm was a clipboard of doom. Her eyes weren't looking forward, they were scanning. Left, right, left, right. A T-800 searching for Sarah Connor, but instead of looking for a future resistance leader, she was hunting for non-compliant lawn ornaments. Our eyes met through the glass. She didn't slow down, but her lips curled into a tight, thin, knowing smile. It was a smile that said, "Yes, it was me. I am the watcher on the walls. I am the shield that guards the realms of beige." I knew, in that instant, that this wasn't a warning. This was a welcome to the neighborhood, and the war had just begun. Being a man who values his peace, my first instinct was strategic retreat. It was a $20 hose. My tranquility was worth more than that. So, I did the unthinkable. I went online and ordered a classic beige garden hose. It was the most soulless, joy-sucking piece of equipment I had ever owned. It looked less like a tool for watering flowers and more like a giant plastic earthworm. But it was compliant. I coiled its blandness by the spigot and considered the matter closed. I was wrong. A week later, another cream-colored envelope appeared. This time, the violation was even more breathtaking in its pettiness. My recycling bin, which I had dutifully rolled to the curb for the 7:00 a.m. collection, had been placed there at 5:45 a.m. A full 15 minutes before the approved 6:00 a.m. to 6:00 p.m. curbside placement window. The fine was now $50. I immediately picked up the phone and called my best friend, Mark. Besides being the only person who found my rants entertaining, he was also a lawyer. "Mark, they're timing my trash can deployment," I said, pacing my kitchen. "I'm not kidding. There's a person, a human being, who is out there in the dark with a stopwatch, monitoring municipal waste protocols. Next, they'll fine me for blinking too slowly." Mark's laughter crackled over the speakerphone. "Dude, I hate to say I told you so, but you bought a house in an HOA. You willingly signed your name on the dotted line of a contract written by the fun police." "I skimmed," I protested. "It was 300 pages of legalese that seemed to be written by Satan's most detail-oriented paralegal. I thought it was just about basic stuff, like not painting your house purple or operating a flamingo-based cult out of your garage." "Never ever underestimate the bottomless well of boredom that is a suburban retiree with a thimbleful of power," Mark said, his laughter subsiding. "Just be careful, Leo. These things can get nasty. Pay the fine, maybe send them a fruit basket. Don't poke the bear." But the bear, it turned out, was already poking me. The final straw didn't arrive in a standard cream envelope. It came via certified mail, requiring a signature. It felt heavy and cold in my hand. Inside was a letter, not from the board, but from the HOA's legal counsel. The issue was Bartholomew. Bartholomew was a small stone gargoyle, about the size of a loaf of bread, that sat unobtrusively in my flower bed. He was a gag gift from my cousin, a relic from her brief but intense goth phase. He was kind of cute, in a grotesque, medieval way. To the HOA, however, he was an unapproved architectural embellishment of a menacing nature. The letter informed me that my previous unpaid fine, for the recycling bin incident, which I had refused to pay out of principle, had been added to a new, larger fine for Bartholomew. My total debt to the HOA was now $275. And then came the knockout punch. If I did not remove the offending gargoyle and settle my account in full within 30 days, the HOA board had voted to authorize their legal counsel to place a lien on my property. A lien. A fucking lien. The word hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. They were going to cloud the title to my house, my single greatest financial asset, over a stone figurine that was smaller than the prize-winning poodle I'd seen its president walking. The humor of the situation evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was a power trip. Mark's advice to not poke the bear was forgotten. The bear had just tried to take a swipe at my jugular. My laid-back, peace-loving demeanor packed its bags and went on an extended vacation. The objective was no longer to survive. It was to win. Fine. She wanted a war? She had no idea who she was dealing with. I wasn't just some guy who designed logos for a living. I was a guy who once spent 3 full days hunting down the perfect serif font for an artisanal pickle jar label because the client wanted it to feel both rustic and trustworthy. My attention to detail wasn't just a skill, it was a superpower, and I was about to turn that superpower on her. My serene home office, once a temple of creativity and calm, underwent a radical transformation. I downloaded and printed all 300 pages of the Westwood Meadows CCRs. The whirring of my laser printer was a battle cry. I spread the pages across my floor, armed myself with a pack of multicolored highlighters, and began my descent into the madness. It was worse than I could have ever imagined. It was a labyrinth of legislative insanity. Article 5, Section 4. Grass shall be maintained at a height no less than 2 inches and no greater than 3.5, 3.5 inches. Article 5, Section 7. No more than three potted plants may be visible from the street. Said pots must be of a terracotta or ceramic nature. Plastic is strictly prohibited. Article 6, Section owned. All visible mulch must be of a cedar or cypress variety. Pine bark nuggets are grounds for immediate fining. This wasn't a rule book. It was a manifesto written by a control freak with too much time on their hands. But as I waded through the swamp of stipulations, an idea began to form. It started as a flicker of defiance and blossomed into a full-blown plan. I had always wanted to build a proper backyard patio, a place to grill and entertain. And I needed a small soundproofed workshop for some of my messier creative projects. This was the perfect Trojan horse. A project of that scale would require permits. It would require architectural plans submitted to the HOA. And most importantly, it would require me to have a perfect, undeniable understanding of my property lines. It was a legitimate reason to dig into the very records that governed this petty kingdom. The next day, I called a local contractor with stellar reviews. A gruff voice answered the phone. "Sal's Construction. What do you need?" "Hi, my name is Leo Maxwell. I'm looking to get a quote on a paver patio and the foundation for a small workshop." "All right. So a 16 by 20 paver patio, footings for a workshop. Standard stuff," Sal said after I gave him the details. There was a pause. "You in Westwood Meadows?" "Yeah, how'd you know?" "Lucky guess," he grunted. "You talked to your HOA yet?" "That's a developing situation," I said carefully. "The president seems to think my garden hose is a threat to the republic." Sal let out a heavy, world-weary sigh. "Let me guess. Miller. Karen Miller." "You know her?" I asked, surprised. "Kid, everyone in the trades in this town knows her. She once tried to fine my crew because our work truck was a jarring shade of commercial white," said it lowered the tone of the neighborhood. "She made us park 3 blocks away and haul our tools in by hand. Caused a whole scene." He paused, and I could hear him chewing on something. "Listen, you want to do this, you gotta have your ducks in a row. I mean every single I dotted and T crossed. Get your plans approved in writing. Get your city permits in hand before I even think about breaking ground. And get a copy of your official property survey. A real one. From a surveyor. Don't give her an inch, because she'll take a mile and then fine you for the mileage." Sal's advice solidified my plan. The survey. That was the key. I had to know my exact boundaries before this war went nuclear. The County Hall of Records was exactly as depressing as you'd imagine. It was a cathedral of bureaucracy, built from beige bricks and despair. The air smelled of old paper, dust, and the faint, lingering scent of lukewarm coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sickly yellow pallor on everything. I approached the main desk, behind which sat a woman who looked as if she had been sculpted from the very beige clay of the building itself. Her face was a mask of profound indifference. "Hi," I said cheerfully. "I'd like to look up the original plat maps and deeds for my property." She looked at me, then at her computer, then back at me, as if my request was the most inconvenient thing to have happened to her all week. After a series of sighs and lethargic keystrokes, she pointed a long, bony finger towards a dark corner of the room. "Microfiche. Over there. Records are filed by parcel number." Microfiche. Of course. I half expected them to hand me a stone tablet and a chisel. I found the machine, a clunky, ancient device that looked like a prop from a 1970s sci-fi movie. After a solid 10 minutes of fumbling with the controls, I finally managed to pull up the plat map for the Westwood Meadows subdivision, drawn in 1978. There was my lot, number 42. I traced its neat, rectangular lines with my finger on the screen. Then I looked at the lot next to mine. Lot 43. Karen Miller's lot, and that's when I saw it. It was a faint, dotted line, cutting a perfect rectangle out of the back corner of her property. It was labeled 10 feet drainage, utility easement. This wasn't unusual. Most properties have them. But something about it made me pause. I switched from the plat map to the deed records, my heart starting to beat a little faster. I pulled the original deed from my house, Lot 42. I read the legal description, a dense block of text about metes and bounds, degrees and minutes. Then I pulled the deed for Lot 43. I read its description, and then I saw the difference. The legal description for her property noted that it was subject to a 10-foot easement on its western boundary. Standard stuff. But the legal description for my property, Lot 42, was different. It described the full dimensions of my parcel first, and then mentioned that a portion of it was designated as a utility easement. The language was subtle, a piece of legal minutia that had probably been overlooked for decades, but the implication was monumental. I traced the chain of title, property transfer by property transfer, all the way back to 1978. The language never changed. Wait. No, that couldn't be right. I pulled up the satellite view of my neighborhood on my phone and held it next to the microfiche screen. I zoomed in on the back corner of Karen's yard, at the area marked as the easement. My breath caught in my throat. The 10-foot strip of land wasn't just some random patch of grass. It was Karen's pride and joy. It was her award-winning rose garden. Her perfectly manicured, meticulously pruned, Garden of the Month winning rose garden, the one she was always tending to in her stupid pink tracksuit. And her automated, multi-zone sprinkler system, and the little flagstone walkway she had installed last year. The blood rushed to my head. According to the foundational documents of this entire neighborhood, the land her prized garden was sitting on was mine. For nearly 50 years, she and her predecessors had just been gardening on my lawn. I didn't just have a trump card. I had the entire deck. I had a royal flush, and I was about to play my hand. My hands were shaking slightly as I dialed Mark's number, pacing outside the Hall of Records. "You are not going to believe this," I said, the words tumbling out of me. "Mark, I own her garden. I literally own her prize-winning rose garden." Whoa, slow down," Mark said, his lawyerly caution kicking in. "Leo, what are you talking about? Easements are complicated. Just because there's an easement doesn't mean you own it like a get-out-of-jail-free card." "No, you don't understand the way it's written," I insisted. I quickly emailed him the photos I'd taken of the deeds and the plat map. I could hear him humming as he read them. The humming stopped. There was a long silence. Then, a low whistle. "Holy crap, Leo." His tone had shifted from skeptical to giddy. This is beautiful. The language is unambiguous. The easement is designated out of your parcel, not into it. Her lot was created subject to your property's pre-existing boundary. She never owned that land. For all these years, she's been trespassing. Hell, based on this, you've probably been paying property taxes on her prized petunias. So it's real? It's mine? It looks like it, but you need to make it official, Mark advised, his voice buzzing with excitement. Don't do anything until you have a certified survey. Hire a licensed surveyor. Have them go out and plant physical markers. Get it on paper. Make it ironclad. The next morning, I found a local surveying firm with a reputation for being meticulous. They said they could send someone out the following day. Her name was Brenda. Brenda arrived in a dusty pickup truck. She was a woman in her 60s with a deeply tanned, sun-weathered face, a shock of white hair tied back in a ponytail, and a bright orange safety vest that had seen better days. She hopped out of the truck with a grin and an infectious, cackling laugh that echoed down the quiet street. She clearly loved her job. "So, heard you're having a bit of a disagreement with the neighbors," she cackled, unpacking a tripod and a piece of high-tech equipment that looked like it belonged on a Mars rover. Love these jobs. They're always the most interesting. I watched from my living room window as she set up her gear. It didn't take long for the Queen to emerge from her castle. Karen stormed out of her front door, clad in a baby blue tracksuit this time, her visor firmly in place. "Excuse me," she barked, marching towards Brenda. "What is the meaning of this? You are setting up equipment on HOA common property." Brenda didn't even look up from the viewfinder on her instrument. "Actually, ma'am, according to the official county plat map, I'm standing squarely on the property line of Lot 42. That would be Mr. Maxwell's property." "This is highly irregular," Karen sputtered, her voice rising. "I am the president of this homeowners association. I demand to know what is going on." Brenda finally looked up, pushing her sunglasses down her nose. "He's getting a survey done for a new patio," she said calmly. "Standard procedure. You'll have to take it up with him." Then, she looked straight at my window and gave me a slow, deliberate wink before turning back to her work. Karen was left standing on the sidewalk, fuming and powerless. It was glorious. 2 hours later, Brenda knocked on my door. She was holding a clipboard with a freshly printed diagram, and she was grinning from ear to ear. "Well, Mr. Maxwell, congratulations," she said, letting out that signature cackle. She tapped the diagram with her pen. "The original property pins are right where the old map said they'd be. That 10-foot strip at the back? It's all yours. The sprinkler heads, the fancy stone path, the whole shebang." She leaned in conspiratorially, her voice dropping to a loud whisper. "You could build a 2-car garage right in the middle of her prize-winning hybrid tees if you wanted to. The property pins don't lie. That land is yours, free and clear." Mark and I held a strategy session over video call that night. I was ready to march over to Karen's house, survey map in hand, and declare victory. No, Mark said, shaking his head. "That's a rookie move. You don't fire your silver bullet right away. Where's the fun in that? We have her in a cage and she doesn't even know it. Before we show her the cage, we're going to rattle it a little." His grin was positively diabolical. "We're going to begin phase 1, malicious compliance. We use her own ridiculous rulebook against her. We'll drown her in the very bureaucracy she created." The plan was beautiful. It was petty. It was passive-aggressive, and it was perfect. My first target was a small, 2-foot-tall decorative fence post that marked the edge of my front flower bed. It was looking a little weathered. The next morning, I began drafting my first official architectural change request. It was a masterpiece of weaponized paperwork. I didn't just fill out the 1-page form. I created a 10-page submission package. It included the original form, filled out in painstaking detail, 3 different paint chip samples for the proposed color, whispering wheat, taped to a card and labeled, a 4-page environmental impact statement. I'd cobbled together using information from various university agriculture websites, detailing how the eco-friendly, low-voc paint would not harm the surrounding flora or fauna. A hand-drawn-to-scale schematic of the fence post from 3 different angles, with the area to be painted shaded in. A 2-page essay I wrote titled, "The Harmonious Integration of Whispering Wheat, An Aesthetic Vision for Westwood Meadows," arguing that the new color would better complement the neighborhood's overall visual ethos. I submitted it to the HOA's official Dropbox. I could almost feel the waves of pure rage radiating from Karen's house as she was forced to review my ridiculously thorough, and by her own standards, utterly flawless application. 2 weeks later, a letter appeared in my mailbox. My request had been, begrudgingly, approved. Phase 2 targeted a rule I'd found buried deep in the bylaws. Any audible outdoor decorations, e.g., wind chimes, must not be audible from a distance greater than 20 feet from the property line. I bought a set of the tiniest, most delicate wind chimes I could find. They made a faint, tinkling sound, like a fairy sneezing. Then, I called Brenda the surveyor back for a follow-up consultation, a service for which I happily paid. Armed with the surveyor's tape measure and a decibel meter app on her phone, we proceeded to hang the wind chimes from a tree branch. We spent a full 30 minutes adjusting the position until they were hanging at a scientifically verified distance of exactly 20.1 feet from Karen's property line. They were technically compliant. But on a quiet evening, when the wind was just right, the faint, maddeningly cheerful tinkle was just barely audible from her back patio. It was the sound of victory. Karen was losing the plot. My meticulous compliance was driving her insane. She couldn't find a single rule I was breaking, so she turned her attention to the one thing she could still attack: my patio project. The first real shot across the bow came when Sal's crew arrived to drop off a load of gravel. They were consummate professionals. They parked their dump truck legally, laid down giant tarps on the street to protect the asphalt, and worked efficiently. But the mere presence of a commercial vehicle was enough to send Karen over the edge. I was in my kitchen making a sandwich when I saw it. A black and white police cruiser, lights off, pulling up slowly in front of my house. 2 officers got out. And right behind them, marching with purpose, was Karen, pointing a trembling, accusatory finger at Sal's truck. I sighed, put down my sandwich, and walked outside to greet them. "Afternoon, officers," I said calmly. The younger of the 2 cops looked at me, then at the truck, then back at me. He was trying, and failing, to stifle a grin. "Afternoon, sir. We, got a call about a suspicious construction vehicle." "Suspicious how?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Did you think it was secretly a Decepticon? It's here to deliver gravel for my patio project. I have the city permit right here if you'd like to see it." I pulled the folded paper from my back pocket. Before the officer could respond, Karen jumped in. "Officer, this man is a menace!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with indignation. "His projects are a blight on our community. He is deliberately flouting the spirit of the rules." The older officer, a man with a graying mustache and the weary eyes of someone who had seen it all, turned his gaze on Karen. "Ma'am, is the truck illegally parked?" "Well, no," she admitted. "Is it blocking traffic?" "No, but it's a very jarring shade of commercial white," she stammered. The younger officer turned his body slightly away from Karen, ostensibly to look at my permit, and lowered his voice. "Is she always like this?" "You have no idea," I whispered back. "Last week she tried to fine me because my garden hose was too green." The officer's shoulders started to shake with suppressed laughter. The older cop handed my permit back to me. "Everything seems to be in order here, sir." He then fixed Karen with a stern look. "Ma'am, this is an HOA dispute. It is not a police matter. Please do not call 911 unless there is an actual emergency." They got back in their car and drove away, leaving Karen standing alone on the sidewalk. Several of my neighbors, drawn out by the commotion, were now openly staring. Her face, a mask of fury and public humiliation, was a sight to behold. It was a major, decisive victory in the war of attrition. The cop incident cemented my status with Sal and his crew. I went from being just another client to their beloved mascot. The next morning, Sal showed up with a box of donuts. "Heard you had a little visit from the local constabulary," he said, a huge grin spreading across his face. "The guys at the supply yard are already telling the story." "You're a legend, kid." From that day forward, they were firmly on Team Leo. They found the feud endlessly amusing and began offering their own brand of helpful advice. "So I was rereading the city noise ordinance," Sal said to me one afternoon, leaning against his truck. "Says we can't start power tools before 8 a.m. He took a long, meaningful sip of his coffee. "It doesn't say a single thing about when we can start unloading heavy materials. You know, dropping 50-pound bags of concrete mix off the back of the truck. Accidentally, of course. Things get slippery." "Sal," I said, looking at him with newfound reverence, "you are an evil genius. I love it." The construction of the patio began, and it was a masterclass in perfectly legal psychological warfare. The crew followed every rule to the letter, but they took immense pleasure in making their presence known. They had loud, cheerful conversations about their weekend fishing trips. They sang along, badly and with great enthusiasm, to a classic rock station on their portable radio. And every single time Karen glared at them from her window, every member of the crew would stop what they were doing and give her a big, friendly, coordinated wave. Her blinds would snap shut, and we would all smile. The final summons arrived, as expected, in a cream-colored envelope, but this one felt different. It was a notice for an emergency HOA board meeting. The agenda was chillingly singular. Agenda Item 1. To vote on the imposition of a lien on the property of Lot 42, L. Maxwell, for continuous and flagrant violations of the CC, rupees. This was it. The final showdown. The moment she had been building towards. She was done with petty fines. She was coming for my house. The evening of the meeting, I prepared for battle. I went to a print shop and had them print out a huge, poster-sized copy of Brenda's certified property survey map. The 10-foot easement, my 10-foot strip of land, was highlighted in a vibrant, unmissable yellow. I put the original deed, Brenda's certified report, and the poster into a crisp new portfolio. I put on my nicest button-down shirt. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a performance. Mark, smelling blood in the water, insisted on coming along for moral and legal support. He showed up in a sharp suit, looking every bit the cunning lawyer he was. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a sterile room with folding chairs and the faint smell of lemon-scented cleaner. About 30 homeowners were there, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. At the head of a long table sat Karen, looking smug and triumphant. She was flanked by the other 2 board members, a timid, balding man named Gary who wouldn't make eye contact with anyone, and a stern-looking woman named Carol who looked like she chewed nails for breakfast. This was Karen's court, and I was the prisoner on trial. Karen called the meeting to order with a sharp rap of her gavel. She then launched into her grand indictment. For 10 solid minutes, she regaled the assembled homeowners with a dramatic, almost tearful monologue detailing my reign of terror. She spoke of the hose, a brazen disregard for our community's aesthetic standards. She spoke of the trash can, an assault on the temporal sanctity of our neighborhood. She spoke of Bartholomew, the gargoyle, a symbol of darkness and nonconformity. She painted me as a monster, a rogue element bent on unraveling the very fabric of their peaceful, beige-tinted utopia. Therefore, she concluded, her voice ringing with self-righteous authority, I formally motion that this board vote to place a lien against Lot 42, to recover the unpaid fines, and to send a clear message that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated in Westwood Meadows. Carol nodded grimly. Gary stared at his hands. All eyes in the room turned to me. This was my moment to grovel, to plead my case, to defend my actions. I stood up slowly, holding my portfolio. Thank you, Karen, I said, my voice calm and even. That was very passionate. I don't wish to address any of those alleged violations at this time. A confused murmur went through the crowd. Karen's smug look faltered for a second. Instead, I continued, walking to the front of the room, I'd like to talk about my new workshop. I pulled the poster-sized survey map from my portfolio and taped it to the wall behind the board members. The bright yellow highlighted strip was impossible to miss. As you all know, I'm building a small workshop in my backyard. I've been very, very careful to follow all the rules. And to do that, I had to get a professional survey done to know exactly where my property ends. I gestured to the map. And in that process, I discovered something fascinating. According to the official county records, which I have right here, my property includes this 10-foot strip of land right here. I traced the yellow rectangle with my finger. Karen scoffed loudly. That's a common utility easement. It belongs to the association. Actually, I said, turning to face her directly, it's not. According to the original deeds for both of our lots, that land is legally part of my parcel. It belongs to me. Which brings me back to my workshop. I reached into my portfolio and pulled out a new rendering of my planned workshop. I walked up to the map on the wall. I've decided I'd like a little more room for the project, a little more of a buffer, so I'll be filing a new site plan with the city tomorrow, to build it right here. With a piece of tape, I stuck the drawing of the workshop directly over the area of the map that depicted Karen's rose garden. The room fell into a stunned, absolute silence. You could have heard a pin drop on the industrial carpet. Then, chaos. People started whispering, pointing at the map, turning to their neighbors. Gary, the timid board member, went pale. Karen's face, which had been smug just moments before, turned a blotchy, furious red. That's my garden," she screeched, her voice a shrill whistle. "That's absurd. I've tended that garden for 15 years. At that moment, Mark stood up, calm and composed in his suit. "And for 15 years, ma'am," he said, his clear, lawyerly voice cutting through the noise, "you've apparently been trespassing on Mr. Maxwell's property. The chain of title and the certified survey are legally indisputable. In fact," he added, letting the words hang in the air, "Mr. WWWW. Maxwell would be well within his rights to ask you to immediately remove your personal sprinkler system, your flagstone walkway, and all of your personal plantings from his land. Or, he could just start tilling tomorrow morning." The color drained from Karen's face. She opened and closed her mouth, sputtering, but no words came out. Her entire platform of absolute order and the sanctity of the rules had just been demolished by the ultimate rule, a property deed. Her weapon had been turned against her, and it had delivered a fatal blow. The motion for the lien was forgotten. The meeting was over. Her reign was over. The fallout was swift and spectacular. A week later, an emergency meeting was called, this time by another homeowner. Karen was not in attendance. I was told she had submitted her resignation from the presidency and the board via a curt email that morning. The homeowners, now emboldened and free from her tyrannical gaze, voted unanimously to oust Carol and Gary as well. Then, in a revolutionary fervor, they voted to form a committee to review and dissolve the most ridiculous of the aesthetic rules. Someone nominated me to be the new president. I politely, but very firmly, declined. I did, however, agree to chair the committee to draft a new, simpler set of bylaws based on one principle: don't be a jerk. A few days later, I received a letter from a law firm on behalf of Karen Miller. It formally requested a 30-day grace period for her to remove personal effects and landscaping from my property. Feeling magnanimous in my absolute victory, I had my own lawyer, a very amused Mark, draft a reply granting her request. I sat on my back porch and watched as a professional landscaping crew arrived the following Saturday. Over the course of a full day, they painstakingly dug up every single one of her prize-winning rose bushes, rolled up the sod, and dismantled the little flagstone path. By evening, the 10-foot strip of land was nothing but bare, brown earth, my earth. Once they were gone, I fulfilled a promise to myself. I didn't build my workshop there. I had Sal build it in its original, intended location. Instead, I walked out onto the newly empty patch of dirt, the silent battlefield where the war had been won. I knelt down, and right in the middle of the strip, I placed Bartholomew, the controversial gargoyle. He sat there, a silent, stony monument to the rebellion, surveying his new kingdom. Months passed. Autumn arrived, and with it, a comfortable quiet settled over Westwood Meadows. The new HOA bylaws were a single page long and could be summarized as, keep your property safe and don't let it fall apart. No one cared about the color of your hose anymore. It was a warm Friday evening. I was on my beautiful new paver patio, the fruits of Sal's excellent labor, sipping a cold beer. My workshop was finished, a quiet sanctuary for my hobbies. The air was filled with the smell of grilled burgers from a neighbor's yard. Sal was there with me, having dropped by to admire our handiwork. He took a long swig of his own beer and leaned back in his chair. "You know, I've been doing this for 30 years, he said, looking around. "I've seen some crazy HOA fights. The things people will argue about, it's nuts. But this?" He chuckled, a deep rumbling sound. "This was one for the history books. You're a legend, kid. The story of the guy who took down Karen Miller with a 50-year-old map is going to be told at supply yards for years." "All I wanted was to be left alone," I said with a smile. "I just had to go to war to get some peace and quiet." Toe. I looked out over my domain. My yard. My beige hose, coiled by the spigot, a relic of a bygone era. My gargoyle, standing his silent watch. I saw my neighbor's kid ride by on a bike and wave. The old couple from 2 doors down ambled past and gave me a friendly nod. It was absurd, the whole journey. I hadn't set out to be a revolutionary. I was just a guy who wanted to work on his computer and not be fined for the color green. But in the process of defending my own little patch of peace, I'd ended up liberating the whole neighborhood. I took another sip of beer and leaned my head back, looking up at the stars beginning to appear in the twilight sky. It was quiet. It was peaceful. It was perfect. The good neighbor doctrine had finally been achieved.